Creamy and decadent, my homemade bourbon pumpkin pie is the perfect dessert for your holiday meal. Hello friends, welcome back to the Casual Foodist. I'm Brianna and today we are making homemade pumpkin pie completely from scratch. And my pumpkin pie comes with a little kick from a splash of bourbon. So I'm going to start my pie by making a homemade pie crust, but if you've got a pie crust recipe that you love or a store-bought pie crust, feel free to use that. So this pie crust is pretty simple. We're going to need 1.5 cups of all-purpose flour, 1/2 of a teaspoon of kosher salt, 8 tablespoons or 1/2 cup of unsalted butter, and you want it as cold as you can get. And then also we're going to need 5 to 6 tablespoons of ice cold water. For this pie crust, our food processor is going to do most of the work here. So we're going to go ahead and add in our flour and our salt into the food processor. And then we're going to put in our unsalted butter. And again, you want to use as cold butter as possible. This is going to result in a nice flaky pie crust. After we've got our first 3 ingredients in the food processor, we're just going to pulse this a few times until the mixture becomes crumbly and resembles coarse sand. So our flour and butter mixture is where we need it. We're just going to add in our ice cold water 1 tablespoon at a time. And we're going to add in the water until the dough just comes into a ball. The dough is right where we've got it, so we're going to go ahead and remove it from the food processor. All right, once we've got our dough into a ball, we're just going to turn it out onto a sheet of plastic wrap. Get everyone on there. All right, and we're just going to use our hands and loosely form it into a little disc. And try to get the surface as even as possible. This will make rolling out a little bit later, a little bit easier. All right, we are just going to wrap this up. All right, and then we're just going to put this in the refrigerator for at least 30 minutes. You always want to chill your pie dough. This is going to allow the flour to hydrate and absorb both the butter and water and just make our crust really tender and flaky. So our pie crust dough has been chilled and it's ready to be rolled out. And what I like to do is roll it out in between 2 pieces of parchment paper. And this is just going to keep the dough from sticking to our rolling pin. And we're just going to roll this out until it's about 11 inches around to fit into our 9-inch pie dish. All right, so I'm all done rolling out my pie dough, and I'm just going to peel off that top layer of parchment paper. Another reason I like to use the parchment paper is we can just pick it up here, slide it over to our pie dish, and then lay it on top. So it's a lot easier to transfer that way. We're just going to peel off the bottom layer here. Going to fold in the edges here. And if you've got any excess, you can cut it off. Tear off any overhang here. And we're just gonna roll in the pie dough. And you can just pinch your index finger and thumb around the inside finger, and that's going to get that nice, pretty fluted edge. This is Pistachio, or Tosh for short, and he has been really interested in watching me make this pie, but we're going to put this guy away. All right, so I've washed my hands and we're going to finish preparing this pie dough. We are just going to take one of our pieces of parchment paper and put it over the top of the dough. And then we're going to take some dried beans, or if you've got the fancy sort of pie weights, feel free to use those, and just put it inside. So the pie weights are going to help our crust keep its shape while we do an initial bake known as a blind bake, so it doesn't puff up. We're going to put this in the oven at 425 degrees for about 10 minutes. So while the crust is baking, we're going to start on our filling. You're going to need 15 ounces of pumpkin puree. You can use canned, but I've got some homemade pumpkin puree here, and if you're using homemade, this is going to be slightly less than 2 cups. In here, I've got 3/4 of a cup of heavy cream and 3/4 of a cup of whole milk. Alternatively, you can also use a cup and a half of half and half. It's the same thing. 3/4 of a cup of brown sugar. 2 large eggs. We've got 1 teaspoon of pumpkin pie spice. I've made my own. In here we've got 1/2 teaspoon of ground cinnamon, 1/4 teaspoon of ground nutmeg, and then 1/8 of a teaspoon each of ground ginger and ground cloves. 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract, 1/2 teaspoon of kosher salt, and last but not least, we've got 2 tablespoons of bourbon, and of course you're going to need a little bit of extra for the cook. Now that we've got all of our ingredients, making the filling is just really easy. We're just going to put everything in the bowl and then whisk it all together. So first we're going to add in our pumpkin puree. And I really think it's worth the extra effort to make your own. It's a little bit more cost effective and the texture is a little bit creamier in my opinion. Our cream and milk. And since we're usually making pumpkin pie for Thanksgiving, it's a special occasion, I think it's worth it to use the full fat dairy to make it a little bit more luxurious. Next, we're going to add in 2 large eggs, our vanilla extract, 1/2 teaspoon of kosher salt, our pumpkin pie spice, and then the best part, our bourbon. And I feel the caramel notes from the bourbon really play well off of the pumpkin and the spices, and it's just going to elevate your pumpkin pie. Now that we've got all of our ingredients in here, we're just going to whisk everything together. So our pie crust is done with its initial bake, and we're just going to take out our pie weights. And the last thing we have to do is just pour in our pumpkin pie filling. So we're going to bake this pie at 350 degrees for about an hour or until the middle is set. All right, so our pie is out of the oven and it looks and smells absolutely amazing. We are just going to put this in the refrigerator for about 2 to 3 hours to let it chill down, and then all it needs is a good dollop of whipped cream. You can find a link to the recipe below, and be sure to like this video and subscribe to the Casual Foodist for more recipes like this.